I'm talking. Quiet, Buffalo. I think we are back up and running. So good morning once again. Imagine my entire greeting, but repeated. And Aline, you were wondering if I'd said something or if I could repeat it because it looked funny. I was trying to ask you guys if you could hear me until I realized that if you couldn't hear me, you'd have to lip read and try and get sound that way. So that was, listen, calf, I'm talking. Shame. We've got a whole herd of buffalo here on quarantine. And we do apologize for being beset by gremlins this morning. The rain brought plenty of water. It washed away the dust and the grime and the heat, but it also washed away our electricity as well as our stream. But the good news is that we seem to be up and running. Thank you all for sticking with us. At least we've managed to share this incredible scene. It's quite phenomenal being surrounded by a herd of at least 300, all moving about on quarantine. Hello, girl. It's a breeding herd of buffalo with calves of all ages. And that very sweet young female, or young male, sorry. And just to let you know as to what's been happening this morning, and so you know who's up and about. Brent is on the other vehicle. I have Jeandre on camera with me. Brent and Brian are driving around on Wendy. And Nikki is directing us in FC, along with, in an interesting turn of affairs, Scott assisting her. And don't forget that this is a live safari, so it's all happening right here in Djuma and Arathusa on a very, much cooler, slightly damp and soggy morning. It just comes as a huge relief to all of us. And send us through your questions and your comments on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarthTV. And there you go. I think that pretty much sums up what I was trying to say earlier. For those of you who are not as proficient at lip reading. Hi Anna Marie, I'm glad that you have popped back in to join us as well. It's so funny, these couple of buffalo want to move with the rest of the herd and they're just not quite certain how they feel about it. So they're just like this female, they're going to stand and stare and ruminate on the problem, quite literally. Quite clearly on some of them that they are ladies. If you look at the base of their horns, if we go, that female would oblige us and look back at us, as she has been. The base of her horns is a bit of fluff in between them. It's not quite as solid and well joined together as that of a male. She's actually a very good example because her boss is quite thin. You can, if I'm quiet for a moment, you can hear the incredible mooing sounds around us. And Lisa, who's one of our regular viewers, Lisa, you know that very often whenever we see buffalo herds like this, we always speak about lions following behind them. And this has been, last night was perfect lion hunting weather with the wind blowing, the rain pouring, confusion and chaos abounding. I've done a circuit around them, not always intentionally, but I have done a full circuit around them. I haven't seen any tracks of lions coming through, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. The light this morning isn't all that easy to spot tracks, and it's also, the soil is quite a lot more solid after the rain. Lisa, it's entirely possible. And speaking of lions, a quick update for you all, something that I'm sure will make you all very, very happy. 6 salalas were seen on Londolozi, which means the 2 females we had at Arathusa, plus that group with the subadult males. That one subadult male that I thought had died is safely back with his pride, and I've never been happier to be completely wrong. Very relieved to hear it. They are all reunited once again, hopefully staying out of the reach of the Matimbas as well as the Birminghams. That is wonderful to hear. Interestingly, these buffalo have not moved since yesterday afternoon, really. Yes, they've done a big circle, but beyond that, they've pretty much stuck in the same place. I'm going to shift around and see if I can capture the magnitude of this herd, and while I do, I believe that the rain has brought out some wonderful species of the reptilian nature. So let's head across to Brent so he can say good morning to you.
Welcome to Safari Live. My name is Brent Leo Smith. Sorry about the delays this morning. I've got Brian on camera with me, and here we have a tortoise, and it's not the tortoise we most commonly see, which is the leopard tortoise. This is the only other tortoise species we get in this area. It's called a Speke's hinged tortoise, and if you have a look at that very distinct back, it's actually got a hinge, almost like a hinge, and when it tucks its back legs in, it's able to close that gap there, and you can see that overhang there. And a very, very interesting little tortoise. They don't get nearly as big as the leopard tortoises, and they must be very happy after all the rain. So tortoises will be very, very happy. Lots of grazing, lots of water around in little puddles, so they don't have to move too far between drinks. And Speke, who the tortoise is named after, I wonder if any of our viewers out there know who Speke was and what he was most famous for. It definitely wasn't for naming the tortoise. It was for something quite important in terms of African discovery. So who can tell me what Speke was famous for? And you can send your answers through to questions@WildEarthTV or use the hashtag SafariLive on Twitter. So what our plan is, although we have been moving around for quite some time, unfortunately we haven't seen any tracks. There's a report that Salala Pride are in Sibambili, which is outside of our Travis area, and the wild dogs are to the south of us. Hopefully they'll be heading back for the sunset safari. So we had quite a spectacular thunderstorm last night. Not too much rain, but lots of thunder and lightning. And Melanie is wondering, were there any fires caused by the lightning? Melanie, not that I'm aware of. There's definitely an electricity pole or two that were fried, but apart from that, I don't think there were any fires. So we're going to keep going. What my plan is now is I'm going to head into that last area Krula might be in, with that really stormy weather last night. There's a good possibility she might have made a kill during the night. So we're going to go have a squiz around the treehouse waterhole area. And while we do that, we're going to go back to Jamie and see what the buffalo are up to.
Just have a look at this amazing female. She looks as though somebody's been flicking white paint at her. It's so interesting to see. Actually makes her look really pretty. And I'm trying to work out what that is. It looks like fur. It doesn't look like bald patches. It looks like white fur. I seem to be in the habit recently of finding animals with very interesting coloration. Look at that. Oh, that is a first for me. I have never seen a cow, sorry, not a cow, a buffalo flecked with white like that. It makes her look like some kind of domestic cow breed. No, it's mud. Is it? I can't quite tell. Can't be mud. How can it be white mud? And look through my binoculars. She's absolutely fascinating. Our speckled buffalo. How interesting is that? Very, very interesting. And a big hello and welcome to Steve and Jenny. And Steve and Jenny, I think that you watch us from the south of France, so of course we're sending all of our support in your direction. You wanted to know a little bit about the rain, as did Jeannie. We've had some amazing rain, but it definitely wasn't as much as we needed. It was probably somewhere in the region of 10 mils at the most. I think probably even less. And just to give you a rough idea, this area, the Sabi Sands that we're in, probably should have on average for a year around about 500 to, I'd say about 500 mils of rain in the wet season. Now last year the area probably had about 150 or so, at least on the reserve that I was working on, which is about a fifth of the rain that we need to have. It's a really good start, and it definitely gives the animals as well as the plant life a bit of a reprieve, but it's something that needs to happen. We need to have a couple of really solid downpours that last all day to really start to fill up the dam. You can imagine, if you've seen Buffelshoek Dam and how it's drying out, you can imagine how much water you need to actually start to replenish that. So it's a good start, and I'm really happy that it has happened. And the animals seem to be in high spirits. The buffalo are all moving around, so I'm going to try and move around with them. And I also do need to just hop onto the Game Drive channel to let Andrew know he wanted to come and join me for, not often you get a huge herd of buffalo on quarantine like this. Wow. Okay, I didn't lie to you. I slightly underestimated how many buffalo there are here. There's probably about 500 easily. It is a huge herd. You can see them all. Oh, there's one with a collar on it. Get a little bit closer, we can show you. So great that we had rain. There was a little bit more in the southern Sabi Sands than there was up here, around Mala Mala, that area of central Sabi Sands. They had about 15 mils. I'm going to stop here. I don't want her to go running away. I'd like to just show you the buffalo with the tracking collar on it. Now that would be, there's plenty of researchers and research organizations that operate around here. And they will have placed that on her. They will pick a female just because the females are guaranteed to stay with the herd. And you'll probably find that in that box is a GPS system or a satellite system that will send through the coordinates of this herd twice a day. Or depending on how they've set it, maybe 3 times or 4 times a day. It depends on how fast they want the batteries to be used up. And what they can do then is, you can just imagine, is you can plot those GPS points on a map, and you can get an idea of the way that buffalo herds move and where they go. Do they rotate through areas? Do they move randomly? Is there a pattern? Is it seasonal? It's the type of research that can go on for years and years, but yield some incredibly interesting results. Here they come. I might be wrong, it might even be 600. These buffalo are actually looking in very good condition, and it's good to see them happy and know that the rain is coming. And Wingnut, you were wondering if many of these buffalo would be pregnant. The answer is yes, unless they have a young calf with them, and they're still lactating, in which case they will not be coming into estrus just yet. Hello. Yes, big girl, you could be pregnant. You're quite round. Definitely quite round. Now, there's no real set season for buffalo. They're not like impala where they all give birth at the same time. It can be spread out throughout the rainy season. But a lot of them will be pregnant coming up to give birth around February, March and April. Tends to be the peak breeding time for this area. Now, I've told this story before, but for those of you who might have missed it, I had a very, very interesting experience. So if there are females that are pregnant in this herd, usually what they'll do is they'll disappear off and they'll go and hide away in the bushes to have that calf and to give birth. But I happened to witness one situation where a female couldn't get away. I think the labor caught her by surprise and she couldn't get away from the rest of the herd. And as soon as her water broke, the buffalo get into a state of mind that's known as pregnancy hysteria. So the other buffalo was smelling the hormones and the pheromones coming from this female, and for some reason it triggers a switch in them and they get unbelievably excited. And the end result was one female started battering her with her horns, and the whole herd, it was a much smaller herd than this one, but the whole herd was chasing her around and around and around until she eventually sought refuge. Sorry. Apparently can't breathe, speak and swallow at the same time. The whole herd chased her until she sought refuge next to our car. And she was fortunate. We were able to sort of push the rest of the herd away from her. And she did have her baby and her calf did survive. But you can understand why then buffalo move away. This one's also slightly speckled. I think that they are... It's very interesting. That's interesting because Chris in Australia, you were talking about that speckled calf. Here we've got a nice view of the one with the collar. But Chris, apparently you've seen photos of our speckled buffalo around camps in the Sabi Sands on blogs. It's interesting to know. Very curious to find out a little bit more about that. So pretty looking. You can see that bulky yellow collar. That's where all of the batteries and the internal systems sit. Doesn't disadvantage her in any way. The other buffalo will ignore it. They won't really notice it. And as you can see, it doesn't restrict her movement. So she's perfectly healthy and happy. It'd be interesting to know how she was chosen, or if it was just a random selection. She's not a young female. She's got her horns are quite pockmarked. She's got a little bit of balding around her face. I wouldn't say she's terribly young, but she would have been chosen because she will stick around with the rest of the herd. Anna-Marie, it does sort of look like a cowbell around her neck that you might have seen in Switzerland. Very interesting to see, and it's providing so much valuable information that I can't even begin to explain to you. It allows the people working in this area to have a far better understanding. Oh, itchy, 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 itchy. When you don't have fingers or fingernails to help remove ticks, then a raisin bush is the next best thing. And if we get a nice close shot of the cow coming forward, we might be able to see some of those ticks that are causing that itchiness. Well, it's wonderful to have Susan on board with us. Susie, you've been becoming addicted to our live drives, and it's fantastic to hear from you. We love hearing from new viewers. It is wonderful to know that we're reaching out to people around the world. Please let us know where you're from, and feel free to send through any questions or comments you might have. He's just got an itchy head. And now an itchy back. And Genevieve, we spoke about that speckled buffalo. You might have been watching the live drive where we had the white-faced mongoose. And of course we've got this female with an artificial collar around her neck. And you were wondering, in social creatures like buffalo, if there is one that looks physically different, is he or she treated any differently by the rest of the herd? And no, for the most part, absolutely not. It tends to be, for example, leucistic. You do get leucistic buffalo, so calves born incredibly pale in color, almost pretty much white, lacking in pigment. Those calves tend not to make it to adulthood, not because of the reaction of the herd, but because of the fact that, first of all, the sun damage is intense to white skin, but also because they stand out far more in terms of predation. So they become much more of an obvious target to predators. But for the herd itself, bear in mind they see pretty much in black and white, and most of their world is governed not by what they're seeing, but what they're smelling and what they're hearing. So the herd communication is more along those lines than it is to do with visual cues. The visual cues come second. But for the most part, there isn't any difference in the way that they are treated. It's just if you get the really leucistic animals that it comes as a disadvantage to them. Now, most of our herd has actually wandered off. We've slowly got a couple of big male stragglers moving behind. The Duggar boys are coming. I think we should do a quick loop around and just see where they're going. And while we do that, let's head across to Brent, who I believe has a giraffe to show you, and we'll be back with you very shortly.
And there we have a lovely female giraffe feeding off a weeping waddle and a buffalo thorn. So, a lovely fresh morning. After the rain. Oh, that other giraffe just got a fright, just jumped off. What is that giraffe seen? Let's just slide forward a bit. Or is it just looking at the other giraffe? I think it might just be looking at the other giraffe. So we've got 1, 2, 3 that I can see. Let's just move forward a little. Lovely young male here to the left. More out in the open than the others. Hello, Gerald. And Gerald's a bit jumpy. And you can see that horns, even though it is a young male, of the bald spots on top, and the females will have that long hair. Oh, another giraffe. That's 5. You see it, right? It's quite a difficult one to spot. Off to the right. It's got its neck very low, feeding. Just make out a few bits of colour through the leaves. There we go. Feeding on something quite low to the ground. They're not being the most pleasing giraffe. They're not sitting in areas where we can see them nicely. Hopefully they will move. There we go. Incredible animals. Only 2 actual giraffe species in total in Africa, all are from the family, and that includes most of the giraffe, the southern giraffe, Maasai giraffe, Rothschild, reticulated. They're all more than less related. They all fall under the same sort of heading. The only other one is the okapi, which lives in the deep Congo rainforests between the Cross River and the River Congo in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And a little bit earlier we asked about where the Speke's hinged tortoise got his name, and who Speke was, and how important he was, and what was he most well known for. And well done to Georgianne in Illinois, who got it correct, as he travelled with another explorer by the name of Burton. They were some of the first Europeans to reach Lake Victoria, and they found one of the sources of the Nile. And there's actually Hollywood did a movie on it called The Mountains of the Moon. A good watch if anyone is interested in doing that. Obviously, being Hollywood, not quite factually correct, but still a very entertaining movie nonetheless. Well, these giraffes seem to be heading further into the drainage line. We're nearly at Treehouse Waterhole, so let's see if anything's around there. I'm looking in all the marula trees, or any tree at the moment, for the Queen of Djuma. Hopefully with that stormy weather last night, she might have been able to catch some dinner. While we continue to search for the Queen, let's go see Jamie's got an aquatic animal.
I've left the buffalo to go about their business and returned to visit apparently aptly named Peter in the pan. That was named by Kevin. And Kevin, just a quick thank you for your update as well about the lions roaring that you heard on the dam camera. It was around 2 o'clock this morning. They are on Torchwood. It is the Birmingham boys, probably, that you heard. And they're still around that area. No longer with the female, I don't think. But I'm sure she's also around there. So we've returned to check up on the happenings at the pan. And I'm sure this is a very relieved Hamakor that has made its way down, because all of the other animals have moved away from the pan now that there's groundwater to drink. So the Hamakor can come and have a sift around for any kind of little invertebrates it might find on the edge of the pond. The only other creature it has to share the space with is one very large bull hippo. He's been here for a couple of days now, probably about a week. He's absolutely fine. He's found himself a nice happy pan where he doesn't have to share it with any other hippos. It might not be the deepest pan out here, but then again, most of the dams aren't very deep. So at least he has his own space, although he has to fend off the attentions of male buffalo and elephants that want to come and chase him away. He's a bit beaten up, a little bit. There's some scratches on his back. You'll probably find that he's an old male that got into a bit of a disagreement. As the water gets smaller and smaller around here, or the dams get shallower, the hippos come under pressure and they start to get quite aggressive and protective over their personal space. It's usually bulls like this that are then pushed out by a larger one, a larger male, and have to retreat and find a place of safety to lick their wounds. Yeah, there's a bit of scratching on his back, nothing too serious. And interestingly, hippos, as you can imagine, they live in water all the time. in quite often stagnant, not very clean water. And for that reason, they are one of the most resilient animals out here to things like skin infections. I'm sure many of you will have heard of about the fact that hippos sweat, and they sweat a red substance that acts both as a sunblock as well as an antiseptic. So it'll be helping to keep his injuries clean. As you can imagine, it's not the most hygienic pan to lie down in. The buffalo tend to not worry too much as to whether or not they urinate in the water. And he's actually quite content. It's just not very deep. He has to roll over every now and again so he can cool his back down. I mentioned before, at the end of Friday morning sunrise safari, I saw an elephant bull chase him out of here, and he went on a jog, his early morning exercise around the clearing away from the elephant, and he's looking absolutely fine. He doesn't have any limps. He doesn't look too seriously injured. He's just found a place where he can have some personal space. Air gushing out of those nostrils. I've mentioned that he has to roll around whenever he wants to soak his back, and Bob, you were wondering if he could get under the water if he needed to. I don't think so. I think that is about as deep as it gets, and he's not a small boy. He's quite a big hippo, and I'm sure you'll find that the way that he's lying, his legs are tucked underneath him, and that is as far down as he can get. Maybe if he were to dig away at the mud a little bit, he might be able to sink down, but I think you'll probably find it's quite solid. There's a lot of rock packing around there to make sure that the water doesn't go leaking out elsewhere. Although we've had a short drive this morning, just wanted to let Chris know that we will be having a fireside chat this evening, and it's not extra, it is the last half an hour of the Sunset Safari, and it will consist of all four of us this evening. I hope you will all join us for that. It promises to be quite the lively occasion. It's a nice treat to have all four permanent presenters back on the ground. Here you go, he did a little bit of a roll for us, but nothing too serious. Blinking sleepily. I think I'm going to leave him to his morning rest and head out and see what else I can find. And while I do that, let's head back across to Brent so that he can keep you updated on his progress.
So we're still moving around this area, checking every large marula tree very carefully, hoping to spot a tail or a leg dangling. A question from a city my mother used to live in, from Boston, Massachusetts, and it's from Catherine. She'd like to know, what do the leopards and lions do during those big rainstorms? Well, because of all the wind and rain and whatnot, it makes very, very good hunting time for them. A lot of the animals like impala and zebra, they can't hear so well, they can't smell so well, and it's also quite dark, so they can't see so well. So quite often you find a lot of kills will take place during that very stormy weather. So we're just going to keep checking this block, this area where Karula was last seen, it's going to be almost impossible to see tracks after the rain, but we are hoping to just spot a tail dangling from a tree or hear some impala alarm calling. Hopefully she didn't move too far. Chatting about leopards and Karula and her progeny. Erlene is wondering if anyone's seen Shadow. Erlene, not that I know of. I haven't heard any updates about her since I've been back from leave. I know she was last seen, I think, heading towards the western boundary of Arathusa, so outside of Arathusa, and I haven't heard anything since. Brian, use that extra height to have a look. Well, speaking of height, we've got quite a nice tall plant here. And actually so we've seen a few of them. Some of them have been flying. I do remember showing one a while ago that had a longhorn beetle feeding on it. I'm trying to see what that looks like there. It looks like they're stingless bees collecting the pollen. And you can actually see the pollen on the legs. You see that yellow, and that's how they're collecting it. They'll take it back to their hive. Now these little black bees, or sometimes called mapani bees or sweat bees, make incredibly tasty honey. And very pretty flowers, and this plant is called a tall white squall, and this one is quite a tall one. So the bees have moved off, and you can see only the bottom section of flowers are open. The top haven't opened yet, and they've probably just opened because of the rain. You can see still there, those are all closed. There's a bee hovering on this side now, Brian. There you go. You should be able to get a nice view of them shortly. Coming down. Oh, where's the bee gone? There it is. Isn't that incredible? Look at that pollen collected on their back legs there. It's not always about the big hairies and scaries. Sometimes it's incredible just to spend time with the minute members of the Safari Live cast. Industrious little worker bee. So their hives are quite different from the normal honeybees. Which we get here. Well, our normal honeybee is what you would call an African killer bee outside of Africa, but that's our stock standard honeybee. So they generally will also use hollows and trees, but their entrances are very, very dainty. It's this tiny little wax tube, probably about 2 or 3 centimeters, and it almost looks like a trumpet. And that's what the entrance to one of these sweat bees or mapani bees hives looks like. Now when bees fly, when they're loaded so heavily with pollen, you can actually see them. They can't fly nearly as fast as when they don't have a heavy load. And traditionally, a lot of African cultures or specifically the Bushmen, I know it for a fact, and also the Mbogush of Botswana, will take a hair of like a giraffe's tail or some other large antelope, and if they find a little bee like this that's quite heavily loaded already, they will catch it and they will very delicately tie that hair around them and that makes them much easier to follow. They can't fly nearly as well, and then they'll actually follow the bee back to its hive so they can raid it for honey. Absolutely incredible little animals. So guys, unfortunately it's a very short sunrise safari today due to some unforeseen technical difficulties, but we did have a little bit of rain, which is great for the bush. So from myself and Brian here, have a wonderful rest of your day, and don't forget to join us for the Sunset Safari. Hopefully we'll be fully operational by then. And lastly, Teresa would like to know where my man bun is. Well, Teresa, the man bun is there to escape some of the heat. Fortunately, as you can see, I'm still wearing a jersey this morning, so no need for the man bun today, but maybe it'll make an appearance on the Sunset Safari. For the last few minutes, we're going to go see what Jamie's up to.
Well guys, it's been a slightly shortened sunrise safari, but thank you to Susan for letting us know that she is watching us from Pennsylvania. And a big warm welcome. I hope you will join us. The African rainfall has brought us the new hope and new expectations and the potential for so much excitement. So join us for the Sunset Safari this afternoon. We'll catch you then. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. A big thank you to everyone in FC as well as Jean-Ray for his fantastic camera work. Bye bye guys, we'll see you this afternoon.